Hey, Math 10 class. It's Mr. Lum again. And this week we're going to be talking about overtime pay. So, some of the rules that surround overtime pay and how to calculate it. So, here I have you can download your notes package to follow along and do some of the problems here. You can download that on Microsoft Teams and let's get into it. Anyways, for overtime pay, many jobs have a standard 40-hour work week, but others work odd shifts, and sometimes people work more than 40 hours. So if you work more than the regular number of hours a week, then it is classified as overtime. And you will earn extra money for those extra hours. Often, time is paid at either time and a half or what we call 1.5 times or 2 times the regular wage. In the workforce, people don't say usually 1.5 times or 2 times the regular wage. We'll say time and a half or double time the regular wage. And we're going to talk about what exactly that means. So, first off, before we get into what time and a half and double time mean, we're going to talk about how is overtime calculated. There's two different types of overtime. First off, there's weekly overtime. If you work over 40 hours a week, then for those hours you work over, you'll be paid at a rate of 1.5 times your wage. So just to make the numbers easy, if you are making $10 an hour, okay, if you make $10 an hour and you work overtime, the hours that you are working overtime, you are no longer making $10 an hour. You are times 1.5. You are making $15 an hour because you only for the hours that you work over 40 hours, and that is what we call weekly overtime pay. So that is your new wage if you're working more than 40 hours. So the first 40 hours, $10 an hour. After that, time and a half, so $15 an hour. Now there's something else. There's another type of overtime pay, and that's called daily overtime pay. If you work over 8 hours a day, then the hours you work over, you will earn extra pay. Now it depends. So if you work between 8 and 12 hours a day, you'll get also the same 1.5 times your pay or time and a half. So if you work 9 hours in a day, okay, the first 8 hours, and say you're making the same wage, $10 an hour. The first 8 hours, you'll make $10 an hour. So the first 8 hours, you make $10 an hour. Okay. So 8 times 10 is $80. And since you worked a total of 9 hours, for that last 1 hour, you'll be getting times 10 times 1.5. Or in other words, that's $15 for that last 1 hour. So then your total would be $95. Now, normally, if you're making 9 hours, you'd only get $90, but now you get 95. Okay. So you get time and a half if you work between 8 and 12 hours. The first 8 hours is regular pay. Between 8 and 12, you get time and a half. If you work more than 12 hours, you get paid double your wage. Okay. So again, if your normal pay is $10 an hour, now if you work more than 12 hours, your pay would be $20 an hour. Okay. Now we're going to be talking about a scenario where someone works weekly overtime pay and they have some daily overtime pay. Now there are some rules if you have both weekly and overtime pay, and we're going to jump into that. But to kind of let you know is that you cannot earn overtime on top of your overtime pay. So if you're making $20 an hour because you are working more than 12 hours and those hours are overtime in the weekly sense, you do not go 20 times 1.5. You cannot get overtime on top of your overtime pay. And we'll do an example a little bit later on about that. Okay. So here's a question right here. It says Caitlin's regular job is $10.42 an hour. She is asked to work later than normal, and she works 11 and a half hours. So how much does she earn? So this is how I usually set up the problem. So first off, here is, she has 8 hours right here. She works a total of 11 and a half hours. So the first bunch of hours was just her regular pay. So I want to find out her wage. So I'm going to go 8 hours times her wage, which is 10.42. That's going to equal some number. Now she has some overtime right here. And so 8 plus, 3.5 hours equals her total number of hours. These hours right here are overtime. And so they are going to be paid by her wage, 10.42. And since they are they're greater than 8 hours, these 3.5 hours are the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 11th and a half hour. So they're going to be getting paid at a rate of 1.5 times. Okay. And so I'm going to plug that into my calculator. So I'm going to calculate this one first. So 8 times 10.42. So 8 times 10.42 equals, and I get 83.36. So for this particular day, she made $83.36 for her first 8 hours. And for the second one, I go 3.5 times 10.42 times 1.5 equals, and for these 3.5 hours of work, she made $54.71. Now I want to find out the total that she made, so I'm going to add these two up right here. So plus, and I get $138.07. Okay. So hopefully that explains these first 8 hours right here are just normal, straight 8 hours times her wage. And this is overtime, so it's the hours times her wage times this multiplying factor right there. Okay. So let's take a look at the next one right here. It says Mark works for a construction company and earns $15.82 an hour for a 37.5 hour work week. He is paid time and a half. So that means that 1.5 times if he works in excess of 37.5 hours. And he happened to work 42.25. Now, Mark here has a job that has a special benefit, and that says we don't look at the law says 40 hours, but sometimes you can get nice employees or jobs with a very specific standard that say we view a full work week as 37. So that's what kind of job he has. So legally speaking, an employer cannot say that make you work more than 40 hours without overtime paying. But they can, if you work less than 40 hours and the company wants to pay you overtime, you're allowed. Okay. So this is a company that seems to be extra good and wants to pay their employees a little bit extra money. And so they say a full work week is 37.5 hours, and that's legal. And later on in the course, we're going to talk about legal and illegal practices in the workplace. But this is completely fine and legal. So he works for this construction company. So now we kind of have to calculate a few things a little bit differently. So first off, he has 37.5 hours times his wage oops, not 18, it's 15. 1582. And that's going to equal whatever number that is. Now, this is going to be regular. And here's our overtime. Now we can't write 42.25. We have to subtract 37.5 from this to figure out actually how many hours of overtime he had. So I go 42.25 minus 37.5, and I get 4.75. So the amount of overtime hours is 4.75 hours. It isn't 42 hours. That's the total. So that's regular plus overtime. So these two numbers, when you add these two numbers up, will equal 42.25. Now, he gets times his regular wage, and then he gets his paid his time and a half. Time and a half means time, so 1.5. 1.5 times, so I'm going to go times 1.5. Okay, so I'm going to do this one first, actually. 15.82 times 1.5 equals. And for this one, he gets $112.72. I rounded it to it was 71.8 cents. So I just rounded 72 cents. Now I'll do the top one. And he gets $593.25. And now we have to add these things up. So oops. Oh yeah. 4 point. And little calculator mishap. 593.25 equals, and then so the total is 705.9675, or I'm just going to say 97. So that is how much he will earn in that 1 week. Okay. So hopefully you understand now from these two questions right here how you calculate daily overtime and how you calculate weekly overtime. Pretty similar. Okay. We have two more questions right here. Ted works for a company and earns $17 an hour. His friend at work is sick, so Ted is asked to cover his friend's night shift. Ted ends up working a double shift and works 16 hours. How much did he earn? So the first 8 hours that he works is going to be regular. So 8 hours times $17 an hour, and that's going to equal some number. Now, remember, the total number that he has to work is 16 hours. Okay. Now, the rules say between 8 to 12 is time and a half, or 1.5 times. Okay. So here's overtime. Now, between 8 and 12, that's going to be 4 hours right there. Now, if we added these two numbers up, this 8 and 4, that doesn't equal 16, that's 12 right now. So there's going to be another overtime thing, and I'm going to show you why I'm doing it this way. But for the next 4 hours, he makes his wage, $17 an hour, times time and a half, so 1.5 times. Okay. Now he gets his second overtime, so his double overtime. Now this is 8 plus 4, that's 12, and in order to get 16, we need 4 more hours. And so that means he gets his $17 an hour, but we have a different multiplying factor. He gets double time. So it's times by 2 like that. So regular has no multiplying factor. The next 4 hours get multiplied by 1.5, and then anything after that is multiplied by 2. So these hours work out to 16, and that's what it said that he worked. So now we're going to calculate his regular pay. So I'm just going to go 8 times 17. That's 136. Okay. And 0 cents, I guess. And now I'm going to go 4 times 17 times 1.5 equals, that's 102. And for the last one, 4 times 17 times 2 equals, and this is also 136. And we want to add all these things up. Okay, and so his total wage for this one day of work is $374. Okay, so this is kind of like, again, how you incorporate this time and a half and how you incorporate this double time right there. Now, here's the next one. It says Sarah works at a garden nursery. She makes $14.50 an hour. Here is her last week of work. How much money did she earn? Okay, so this one's going to be a lot more complex now, and I'm going to show you why. Now, first off, let's figure out how many total hours she worked. 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's going to be 35 hours right there, plus another 9. So that's going to be 40. What did I say? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's going to be 35 hours plus 9 is 44 hours. Okay, so that's going to be, we have 44 hours total. So we do have some weekly overtime hours. And hopefully you can see what day she worked daily overtime hours. Okay, and so what we have here is that I'm just going to start writing some stuff down. Weekly overtime hours. I'm just going to write OT. Okay. And so the total weekly overtime hours is going to be whatever number is how much above the number 40 did she have. So it's the total of all these hours right here is 44. So weekly overtime hours is 4 hours. Okay. Now we're going to go daily overtime hours. Daily overtime, and I'm just going to write a little 1.5. I usually write that just to show that in case there's any time that is greater than 12 hours that they worked, then I'd write a 2.0. But we don't have anything greater than 12 hours. We just have this one day that they worked some daily overtime hours, and how many hours over was that? Okay, and so that's going to be remember a full day's work is 8 hours, and so that is 1 hour above that. So she just has 1 hour above for daily overtime right there. Now, regular hours. This is the part that people get hurt on. Regular hours. Everyone wants to write 40. So if we write 40 like this, 40 hours, and we add these numbers up, 4 plus 1 plus 40, that equals a total of 45 hours. Well, that's not right because the total needs to be 44 hours. So here's the thing that is very difficult for people to understand is that if you have weekly overtime hours, which is 4, and you have daily overtime hours, which is 1, you cannot have overtime on top of your overtime So the weekly overtime hours starts to cut into the regular hours. So normally regular hours is regular hours is 40 a week. But since we have this daily one right here, we have to turn some of these regular hours into weekly overtime hours. And so what's going to happen is this is going to be 39, right, like that. Now, if you're wondering, I don't think that's right. Um, uh, we're going to go right here to this web page right here. So here's the BC Employment Standards kind of guide right here about overtime pay. And it says, how does overtime calculated? And if we go down here to daily overtime hours, it's all the same stuff. Employees are paid. And if an employee does not work more than 40 hours a week, employees are paid double if it's 12 hours. Their time and a half for any time worked over 8 hours, up to 12. So that's time and a half, just like we talked about. Double time if it's over 12. And now if we go down to the weekly overtime hours, and this is the key part, and it says employees are paid time and a half for, where is it? Employees are paid time and a half for any worked over 40 hours in a week, even if the employee doesn't work more than 8 hours in a day. A week is from Sunday to Saturday. Over the first only the first 8 hours, which means regular hours in a day, towards weekly overtime. So you have to take regular hours and turn them into weekly overtime. You cannot take daily overtime hours and turn them into weekly overtime. In other words, you cannot get overtime on top of your overtime pay. So that's why we have to take these regular hours and turn them into weekly if we need to. So, and here we did need to, because these numbers right here, 4 plus 1 plus 39, that does equal 44. And that must equal the total right there. This is a big mistake that a lot of people make. Anyways, weekly overtime hours, we get paid $14, or this person gets paid $14.50 an hour. Since it's weekly overtime, it's time and a half. Daily overtime at a 1.5 rate. At 1.5 rate. Regular overtime, regular hours, 39 times. 1450, and there's no multiplying factor. Okay, so we're going to do the top one first. 4 times 14.5. 4 times 14.5 times 1.5, and that equals 87. So it's $87 for that one right there. And then it's 21. 21.75 for right here. And then for regular hours, this is their biggest one, 39 times 14.5 equals, and we get 565. And 50 cents. Now we need to add these up. So plus 21.75 plus 87. And the total amount made is $674.25. Okay, and that is how daily and weekly are calculated. Okay, this is going to be a little bit of a tricky one that we're going to get a little bit more practice on. Okay, anyways, good luck. If you have any questions, message me over Microsoft Teams, and I can try my best to help you out.